1,000 years, a few great people walk the face of the earth and leave their mark forever. They make such an impact on humanity, which is almost immeasurable by human standards. Namaskar to all the viewers. Mahatma Gandhi was one of such impact on humanity. He made India an independent country without using any nuclear weapon, army, or milice. There is so much to learn from the man who showed the true values of simple living and high thinking. Today, we have gathered virtually on this platform to commemorate the 151st birth anniversary of Bapu and culminate the celebrations of 150th year of his birth anniversary. This day gives us an opportunity to recall the four fundamental principles that Mahatma Gandhi taught: truth, non-violence, welfare of all, and the peaceful protest. These principles can hold people together and hence form the backbone of dharma, which means to hold together. To mark this day, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Tushar Arun Gandhi, great-grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, grandson of Mr. Manilal Gandhi, and son of journalist Mr. Arun Manilal Gandhi. Born on 17th January 1960, he was raised in the Mumbai suburb of Santa Cruz. He holds a diploma in printing from the Government Institute of Printing Technology, Mumbai. Mr. Gandhi is best known for having established in 1998 in Vadodara, Gujarat, the Mahatma Gandhi Foundation. Since 1996, he has served as president of Lok Seva Trust, an NGO which works for the welfare of textile mill laborers. In 2000, Mr. Gandhi portrayed himself in a fictional Tamil film movie directed by Kamal Hassan, Hey Ram. And in 2009, he did likewise in a semi-fictional movie, Road to Sangam. A non-fiction book written by him, Let's Kill Gandhi, was the bestseller in India. In March 2005, he led the 75th anniversary reenactment of the Dandi March. And in 2019, he became the director of the Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon, Maharashtra. On behalf of the entire Modern Public School fraternity, I extend a cordial welcome to you, sir. We also have amongst us Dr. S.K. Bhattacharya. Sir, in his present capacity, is the president of the Action Committee of Unaided Recognized Private Schools. Sir has served as the principal at Bal Bharati Public School, Gangaram Hospital from 1972 to 2000. And is its lifetime member. He is also the proud recipient of Lifetime Achievement Award by NPSC, Lifetime Achievement Award by Brainfeed, Rotary International Award for being an outstanding educationist, and he's also the former member of governing body of CBSE. We welcome you, sir. And as ma'am said, sir was also the former chairman, Delhi Table Tennis Association. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. With this spark kindling in her mind, we also have with us our school principal, Miss Alka Kapoor, proud recipient of prestigious CBSE Teachers Award, State Teachers Award for her innovative practices in the field of education and other renowned awards and accomplishments. A lady always brimming with zeal, and she's the motivation behind the success of the school in different realms of education. Under her flagship, the enthusiastic Modernites celebrated 150 years of the birth of the Mahatma, taking on plethora of activities to mark these celebrations. Madam also visited a renowned school named Anand Niketan in Wardha and brought with her a bag full of learning experiences and innovative learning strategies that were instrumental in the holistic development of students and teachers alike. Now, dear viewers, without wasting any further time, I shift the spotlight to Mr. Tushar Gandhi for his keynote address, which will be followed by his candid conversation with Mr. Bhattacharya and Madam Principal. If the viewers have any question you wish to ask our keynote speaker, please do not hesitate to put it in the chat box. So over to Tushar, sir. Sir, I request you to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the very generous introduction to me. But I would just like to add one more thing that as I am proud of my paternal lineage, I am also equally proud of my maternal lineage. So the fact that I descend from Sunanda, Sushila, Kastur, Utliba gives me as much pride as being a descendant of Arun Manilal Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. So I would love to be always reminded of the fact that my mothers were equally important in my existence. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and my greetings to all of you and the modern nights on 2nd October, Gandhi Jayanti.
So sorry for the interruption, but your voice is not very loud and clear, sir. I believe if you could have the microphone close to...
Is this better?
Yes, sir. Far better,
Okay.
sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So I continue, or you want me to start from all over again?
Oh, no, sir. Please kindly continue, because we could hear it, but it was not that clear.
Now it's better.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So as we commemorate the 151st birth anniversary of Bapu, we must also remember that last year was also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba. And her contribution to making Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi what he was cannot ever be ignored and should not ever be ignored. And also the fact that she contributed to the freedom movement to the best of her ability must also always be acknowledged, and we should be grateful for that. When she passed away in the Aga Khan Palace prison camp, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, in his message of condolence and tribute to Ba, wrote that she was actually a martyr to the freedom movement, because she was in prison for defying the British on her own, and not just merely because she was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's wife. And he went on to allege that actually her death was murder by the British because they wished to break Gandhi's spirit. And they thought that if Kasturba didn't survive, then Gandhi would be a broken man. And these are not my words. These are Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's words, which are very much available on Google. If you search for Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's tribute to Kasturba, you will get the text of this tribute that he made to her. So I believe that we must also be grateful, not just to the man, but the couple who together for so long held the movement for freedom. And Kasturba more because she was in a relationship with, right from the time when they both were children, and throughout their life and throughout the transformations of the boy she had married till he became known as the Mahatma. And so I think we should not forget that contribution in today's times. It would not be fair, and even our idolizing Bapu would be incomplete without respecting Bapu. So,
Sorry for the interruption, sir. Again, sir, the voice is not
well,
very loud.
I can't do anything better than
So
this.
if you
So
could
you
have the
will have to.
microphone close
I
to,
don't.
no?
No, I don't have a microphone. I have to
This,
use the
if,
laptop's
if,
Okay, okay, okay.
microphone.
if
So
there is
I
any
won't
tech,
be able to do much better than this. I'm sorry.
if this is a technical matter, we cannot help, unfortunately.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So please bear with me.
Yes,
I
sir. This
hope
is
that
better. So the
I
moment you
am
come
able
closer to
to.
the mic, it gets better.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and stay as close to the mic
Yes,
as
sir. Yes,
possible.
sir.
Yeah. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
And let me, today being a joyous occasion of Bapu's birthday, in the present circumstances, I am not very filled with joy, but in any case, it is a matter of celebration. Let's not deviate from that at all. And so let me share a few anecdotes that I grew up listening to and that I believe are very essential today for the future generations to know. And one of my duties that I have always considered to be important duty in my life has to be to demystify the Mahatma. I feel that we have done the greatest injustice to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi by creating this persona of the Mahatma. And it has been an excuse. We have formed that as an excuse so that we can convince ourselves that because he achieved everything because he was a Mahatma, and we don't need to bother about becoming like him because we are mere mortals and we can never be like him. What we must remember is that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was as ordinary a human being as all of us to begin with are. But he did not, he was never satisfied with his ordinariness. And so every day and every moment of his life was dedicated to make himself better than what he was in the previous moment. And he very honestly made that effort. And every step in his life was an improvement. And he improved himself to the extent where people started considering him to be a Mahatma. And we must recognize the fact that we all have that capability of doing. It's not a divine quality. We all have the capability of achieving that. And not all of us will become Mahatmas. But if we make an effort, we will definitely become better than what we were before we started doing that effort. And it's never going to hurt us to do that. It will always benefit us in the long run. And so I don't refer to Bapu as Mahatma at all. I refuse to refer to him as Mahatma. I call him Bapu. I call him Mohandas Gandhi because I think that he would also have appreciated that much more than the fake worship that we see today in our society. We've ritualized Gandhi also. We celebrate Gandhi only on 2nd October or on 30th January. It's like all what we've done with all the gods that we worship. We have a date for them, and that's all. That is the date that matters. The rest of the year doesn't matter at all. If I was to ask somebody to allow me to speak on, say, 10th February, they'll say, नहीं नहीं अब 30 जनवरी तो हो गया, अब वापस नहीं, अब अगले साल बात करेंगे. So this is what we must understand is our hypocrisy. We must understand that if we really believe in Gandhi, then he has to be relevant every moment and not merely confined to anniversaries. And so this is the other thing that we need to, and Gandhi, we must understand, has become a mirror for all of us. A mirror that shows not the glorious picture, but the picture that we always don't want to see. It's the mirror to our souls. When we look at Gandhi, we realize that the reflection that we see is not who's the most beautiful of them all. Actually, the reflection that Gandhi shows us back is that you need to improve. We need to improve. All of us need to improve. And this is what we must treat Gandhi as a reflection of our souls. If we do that, then maybe we will truly be paying tributes to Gandhi. So let me give you a few anecdotes that I grew up hearing from my grandmother and my father, who were fortunate enough to spend many years with Ba and Bapu on their ashrams. Because after Bapu came back to India, after some years, he sent back my grandfather, Manila, his second son, back to South Africa to manage and run the Phoenix Ashram that he had established over there, and to publish and edit the periodical Indian Opinion that he had started in South Africa. And so my grandfather lived in South Africa, and then he married my grandmother and took her back to South Africa too. And so their children were born over there and they were raised in South Africa. And in those days, the travel between countries was not that easy. And so every few years, the whole family would get into a ship and do a sea voyage to come back to India. And then when they came, they would spend 6 months to a year staying with Bapu wherever Ba and Bapu were living, in whichever ashram Ba and Bapu were living, and then go back. And so when in that period, when the family was living on the ashrams, the studies of the children were conducted by Bapu in his own ashram school that he used to run for all the children of the ashram. When he was the headmaster, he was the teacher, and everything that the children learned was directly from him. And so I was fortunate that when I was a child, my grandmother and my father narrated incidents that they had experienced with Ba and Bapu on the ashrams, which became my stories in childhood. And today, when I have the wisdom to understand why I was told those stories in my childhood, I realize and I'm able to appreciate those stories because I can now discern the meanings that my parents, my grandmother was trying to impart to me as a child. And so maybe they will be of help to you also. Today, we see in society that anger seems to be a very big issue amongst all of us, right from the time when we are children to the time we grow up. We are very susceptible to anger, and it becomes a critical issue because sometimes we just can't control our anger and we let the anger dominate all of us in our lives and create very critical situations that when we sit down to analyze them later on, we realize that we could have done much better than the way we behaved. And that's why everybody believes and says that anger is bad and that we should not have anger. But this is a story of that happened with my father. My father, as a child, I told you, was growing up in South Africa, a racist South Africa, racially prejudiced South Africa. And so in his teens, he suffered the racist bullying at its worst. In school, when he was studying, he was beaten up by the white boys because he wasn't white enough. And he was beaten up by the African boys because he wasn't black enough. He found himself to be the boy in the middle who could identify with nobody, and it filled him with rage. And so in his youthful exuberance, he went and invested. He believed that he needed to build up muscle to counteract the violence that he was suffering. And so he went and invested in weights and set up a gymnasium in his house and started pumping iron to build up muscles and things. And he started taking lessons in boxing. So the next time he was beaten up, he could defend himself and he could also beat up his tormentors. When my grandparents saw this, they were very anxious about what was happening, and they felt that Arun was succumbing to his anger and he might end up doing something bad that he might regret for the rest of his life. And so they wrote to Bapu and told him about their anxiety. Bapu said, send Arun to me. Let him come and live with me. And so my father was sent to Sevagram to live with Bapu in his ashram. And Bapu started teaching him and, in his own way. And my father remembers this incident. He said one night there was a storm in Sevagram. And there was a lot of thunder and lightning and winds and all that. And Bapu took my father outside the hut, Bapu Kutir. And he said, Arun, now describe me what you will see. And there was thunder and lightning in the sky. And just as they were watching, they saw that a bolt of lightning fell to the ground and hit a tree in the vicinity of the ashram. And within moments, that tree was reduced to ashes. And it was destroyed completely. So my father described the whole scene to Bapu. And Bapu told him, what is it? How is this happening? So my father explained it scientifically, and he said it's an electric storm and that creates the thunder and lightning in the clouds. And sometimes the lightning gets attracted by the earth and it drops down and falls, and the object it falls on is destroyed. So then Bapu told my father, he said, go into my hut and in my cupboard you will find a torch. He said, bring it to me. So my father brought the torch to Bapu, and then Bapu said, switch it on. So my father switched it on and there was light over there. So Bapu asked my father, explain what this is. So my father said that there are dry cells in the torch, and when I switch it on, the dry cells give electricity to the light bulb and there is light in it. So then Bapu said that means, Arun, that there is electricity in the thunder and lightning in the sky, as well as there is electricity in the dry cells in the torch. And he said, look what happens. The thunder and lightning in the sky is electricity. But when it falls, it destroys the object on which it falls. And in doing so, it destroys itself also. Because once the bolt of lightning falls on an object, it destroys that object, but it also is in turn destroyed itself. You don't ever see lightning jump back into the sky from the ground. It's gone. Once it's fallen, it's ground. It goes into the ground and it's over. And he said, but every time you switch on the torch and switch it off, light happens and then it shuts off again. It's not a one-time thing. So he said, now remember, Arun, that anger is also like electricity. It's a power, it's an energy. It is not a one-time use thing. If you use it like the bolt of lightning that you saw falling from the sky, then the only objective that you achieve is of destruction. You destroy the object of your anger, as well as you destroy a part of yourself in that process. But if you utilize that electricity within yourself to empower yourself to fight against the cause that is making you angry, instead of the person who makes you angry, then you can use the energy of that anger to change the situation, improve it. And in doing so, also improve the person who is irritating you and making you angry. So he says, anger per se is not bad. It's how we use it that makes it good or bad. My father today is 86 years old and lives in the US. But he still remembers that lesson to this day. And everywhere he speaks about peace and nonviolence. And everywhere he speaks, he says that anger is not bad. It's how we use that anger that makes it bad. I think we all must learn this lesson that Bapu taught my father, because it's very essential when today we find it so intimidating. The anger in our society, in our midst, in our families, everywhere, wherever we see, even in our news, every evening the news is filled with rabid anger, and it comes right into our drawing rooms. And that is the anger that is energy being wasted, because it makes no difference, it makes no change. So understand the qualities of anger and then adopt the good that that anger does. Mohandas was thrown out of the train in Pietermaritzburg. He could have been angry and he could have stoned the next train that rolled into Pietermaritzburg. But he used that anger to fight for his rights for the rest of his life and get rights for those who were also subjugated in a similar manner and treated in that manner. So it wasn't merely his words, but the actions of all his life portrayed the fact that anger was good. Please don't find this as an excuse to be angry all the time and say that, oh, Gandhi said anger was good, so we are going to be angry all the time. There has to be a reason for that, and there has to be a productive reason to be angry. Otherwise, it's just wasting your energy. So please don't quote me on this and tell your elders and everybody else that Gandhi has endorsed anger, so we are going to be angry all the time. Otherwise, I'm going to get into a lot of trouble. So this was one story that had a great effect on my life. The other story that I'd like to narrate over here, I hope I have the time. Yes, thank you. So the other story that I'd like to narrate over here is because today, right from children to adults, we are all very concerned about what is happening with our climate, what is happening with our environment, what is happening with our ecology. And climate change is threatening us in a very grave manner. And we are all seeing the effects of climate change worsening every year. And this was another story that happened involving my father in Sevagram. And this was when he was staying, on another occasion, when he was staying in Sevagram with Bapu. And he was a student of Bapu's school. Now in Bapu's school, it was very unique because Bapu used to get hundreds and thousands of letters every day. And like all of us, I don't know how many of us now write actual letters on paper. But those of us who write letters on paper will know that we are in the habit of writing on one side of the paper. And we leave the backside bare. So Bapu used to read all those letters, and whichever letter he found the back to be usable. After he had read and answered those letters, they were all gathered and stitched together to form an exercise book. And then the children in his school would do all their lessons on the clean side of the paper. And Bapu would hand them pencils to write with. And one day my father saw that the stub of pencil that he had was very small and was uncomfortable to hold and write with. And like a young boy, he thought that he deserved to have a new pencil. So he went and asked Bapu, he said, Bapu, please give me a new pencil. I can't write with this. Bapu, being who he was, he said, Arun, show me why you can't write with that pencil. So my father showed him the pencil. He says, see, it's so small. And Bapu looked at it and he said that according to me, there's still 2 more days of writing in this pencil. So you're not getting a new pencil. You better use the same pencil. My father was very disappointed, but he decided that to force Bapu to give him a new pencil, he would not do his studies. So he did not do his studies that day. And the next day when he went back to Bapu's school, he just sat over there without doing any of the exercises. And Bapu noticed this, so he asked my father, he said, why aren't you studying? Why aren't you doing your lessons? And my father said, no, I don't have the pencil. It's too small. I can't write with it, so I won't. unless you give me a new pencil. And Bapu said, no, you sit right next to me and I want to see why you can't write with this pencil. So my father was forced to sit in front of Bapu and write with that pencil. And he was very fed up. He was very angry, disappointed. So he said, as long as I have this stub of pencil, the old man is not going to give me a new pencil. And so that day when he stepped out of Bapu Kuti, he threw the stub of the pencil in one of the bushes around. And the next day again, he went to study without doing his lessons and without doing his lessons in class also. And Bapu asked him, he said, what happened? Why aren't you studying? He said, no, I lost the pencil. I don't have a pencil. So unless you give me a new pencil, I can't study. So Bapu said, where is that pencil? How did you lose it? So for a few minutes, my father tried to bluff him, make excuses. But then he realized that he was not going to get away with it. So he finally confessed. He said, I threw it away. The next question Bapu asked him was, have you gone out of the ashram since yesterday? So my father said, no, I am not allowed to go out of the ashram. I was always inside the ashram. So then Bapu said, then that means the pencil is also in the ashram somewhere. So go and look for it and find it and bring it to me. Now my father was thoroughly disgusted. He was saying, what kind of a miserly grandfather I have. He won't give me, just give me a pencil and forget about the rest of the things. We can go ahead and I'll start studying again. So after an half-hearted effort, he came back to Bapu and said, Bapu, I can't find the pencil, it's lost. So Bapu looked at his watch and he said, this is the time for me to rest. But today I'm going to sacrifice that time and we both are going to look for that pencil. And so Bapu and my father both started looking for the pencil. And because my father knew where he'd thrown it, very soon they found the pencil. And Bapu once again made him sit in front of him and said, now do all your lessons in front of me with this pencil. I want to see why you can't write. But then Bapu realized that Arun was very disappointed and he wasn't understanding the lesson that Bapu was trying to teach him. And so he asked my father a question. He said, Arun, tell me, what is this pencil made of? And my father told him it's made out of wood and lead. So then Bapu said, where do these things come from? So my father said, wood comes from trees and lead comes from mines. So Bapu told him, that means that they are both nature's gifts to us. My father said, yes, they are nature's gifts to us. So he said, now Arun, just for 2 minutes, imagine that if every child in this world decided that a small stub of pencil was not worth using and threw it away, how much of nature's gift to us would be wasted? How many trees would be cut only so that you could waste their wood? And how many mines would be dug only so that you could waste that produce? And he said, think of that. Do you think that nature can keep providing us with these gifts if we are going to continuously keep wasting them? And even today, my father cannot get himself to waste anything, whether it's food, it's resources, anything, it's time, anything, because he realizes that wasting is the greatest sin. But look at what we do today. We are all, if you were told to write an essay on conservation and ecology and your concern for ecology, you, I'm sure, would write reams on that essay. But when we move out of the room, do we remember to switch off the electrical appliances because we are not going to use them anymore? Do we repair a dripping tap soon enough so that water isn't wasted? And then we say that, there is damage to the ecology and it's all done because of the pollution of the cars and pollution caused by industry. And if you live in North India, because the farmers burn the stubble in their fields irresponsibly, it all causes damage. Yes, that causes damage too. But remember the damage that we are causing in our everyday life when we waste things. Your mother will cook some food, but because it's not your favorite dish, you will waste 3/4 of the dish and force them to get you something from McDonald's or cook you a Maggi noodles because that is what you want to eat. At that time, you do not imagine the face of the starving child who is dying because they don't have food on their plate. Don't you think that we are committing a crime during that time? So for these things also, unless we start looking inwards and hold ourselves responsible, I'd like to the teachers and the students of modern school, I would like you to do an honest project. List down an account, make an account of the amount of things that you have wasted in 1 month. Be honest about it. List down everything. A half glass of undrunk water, a half can of a bottle of aerated drinks, a plate of food, a TV that is left on, a light that is left on, a fan, an electric appliance that is left on. And after 1 month, collect all the data of the whole school, and you will be shocked at how much you have wasted nature's resources, nature's gifts to us. Because individually we don't realize it. Individually we keep telling ourselves that we are insignificant. What we do doesn't matter. But when it happens collectively, then it accumulates to a scary and frightening amount. And I assure you, when you do that, you will realize how much damage we as individuals are causing to the environment. My father still can't bring himself to waste because every time he sees something being wasted, he's reminded of the lesson his great-grandfather taught. In conclusion, I'm going to tell you a story of that I think matters to teachers as much as parents and teachers and students. And I'd like you to understand why I'm telling you this story. And it is a story that doesn't concern my father or his family or my grandmother. It's a totally different story. And this is when Bapu was revered as the Mahatma, and everybody thought that he had solutions for every problem, every issue. And so people used to come with all sorts of issues, personal matters, family matters, community matters, and national matters, to get results and solutions to those problems from Bapu. So one day, a mother brought her son to Bapu. The son was advised not to eat sweets because they were dangerous to his health. But the son would not stop eating sweets, and the parents were absolutely fed up and terrified. And so they brought the son to Bapu, and the mother said, Bapu, what you say, even the British obey. So please tell our son, he is not supposed to eat sweets, but he just won't stop eating sweets. So Bapu told the mother, he said, bring the son back to me after 10 days. And the mother was insistent. She said, why don't you just tell him, whisper something in his ears, and I'm sure the magic of your words will make him stop eating sweets. The Bapu said, no, I told you, bring him after 10 days. I will only speak to him after 10 days. So after 10 days, the mother came back and she said, now will you speak to my son? So Bapu said, okay, leave him with me and you go away. I'll call you back after I have spoken to your son. And he whispered some things to the son for a few minutes, and then the mother was summoned and they left. And a week later, the mother and the father brought the son back and they were very happy. And the mother said, thank you very much, Bapu, because whatever you told our son, he stopped eating sweets from that time. And we tried everything. We punished him, we scolded him, we even thrashed him. But he would just not stop eating sweets. But the mother could not resist herself. And she said, if you had done this 10 days before, my son would have been cured 10 days earlier. Why did you have to waste so much time? And then Bapu told them that when you came to me asking me to tell your son to stop eating sweets, I myself was eating sweets and I had no right to tell your son to stop eating sweets. So for 10 days, I stopped eating sweets. And when you brought your son back to me, I told him that, sweets are not dangerous for me. The doctor has not prohibited me from eating sweets. But I have stopped eating sweets, and for 10 days, it has made no difference to me. As a matter of fact, I'm feeling much better. So why don't you also try this out? Because sweets are dangerous for you. And when the boy realized that Gandhi had stopped eating sweets just because he wanted to assure the boy that one should not eat sweets, he decided to not eat sweets. Now look at what was happening in the family. The rest of the family wanted to eat sweets, so the mother would keep cooking sweets and stocking sweets in the house. But they would tell the child, don't eat sweets, it's not good for you. And if he stole the sweets and ate them, he would be punished. But Bapu believed that words did not inspire as much as deeds and actions. And so he never ever preached anything merely by words. Everything that he inspired others to do, they did it because they saw him practicing that themselves. And in parenting and in teaching, because I believe that in today's time of nuclear families and families where both parents work, teachers are the substitutes for that parent. Because if teachers don't become a substitute for that parent, the only thing that the child has is social media and TV. And so the vacuum left by the working parents has to be filled by teachers. And so I believe that parents and teachers are responsible to teach the child from the way they live their lives themselves. Because children are very smart. They see behind the word, they observe. And they realize when the teacher is lying. Because the teacher will be saying something, but in their private time, the children will see them doing the diametrically opposite. And then no matter how good that teacher is, the children will never believe in that teacher or never believe in that parent. And so it is our duty, if we want to imbibe certain qualities into the children, to practice them in our own lives so that the children will see us do that. And then we will not have to tell them to do those things or imbibe those qualities in them. And I think that is the best manner of teaching and parenting. So thank you very much for giving me this time and allowing me to say the few things that I wish to share with you. And I hope that it means as much to you as it has meant to me in my life as I grew up. So I wish you on this occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, and let's find the Gandhi within all of us. Let's find the Mohandas in all of us. And let's dedicate our life to taking a few steps to become like him. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an enlightening speech. Over to ma'am and Bhattacharya, sir, for the candid conversation.
May I now request Dr. S.K. Bhattacharya to please take over from here?
Thank you. It was such an enlightening deliberation by Mr. Gandhi, Tushar Gandhi ji. We are so much thankful to him. So many things that we didn't know about Mahatma Gandhi. His personal experiences that were heard from his grandfather, from his father, and everybody all. He related all the very important and interesting stories that we know more about Gandhiji as a human being, Gandhiji as a father, as a grandfather, and so on and so forth. He talked about one more important thing, that was the anger. He said, nothing wrong with the anger, but the anger must be controlled. must be meaningful, must be productive. Therefore, this is again a very important thing that we learned today from Mr. Gandhi's deliberation today. When I talk about Mahatma Gandhi, of course, he was a multifaceted personality. It's so difficult to give the complete description of that great towering personality. He was not only a great thinker, philosopher, social reformer. I believe one of the fields that we want to discuss today about his contribution in the field of education. During the time of 1935, when the Government of India Act was passed and enforced in the year 1937, Mahatma Gandhi was the first man who raised his voice that every child in the country had the right to education. And he also very forcefully propagated that elementary education should be enforced, which should be made compulsory and universal. And that is the slogan that he raised for the first time. He understood that the country was in a very deplorable condition in those days. Perhaps almost about 90% people in the country in 1930s and all were not only illiterate, they were not very productive also. And it was all because of a very destructive policy of the British government. British government had already destroyed our very well, not only well balanced, very meaningful education system, our own traditional education system, Oriental education system we call, was totally destroyed deliberately by the British government. Therefore, the entire country was in a very deplorable condition. And in those days, Mahatma Gandhi for the first time said that India must start first at education for all. This is the only way that we can pave the way for the social, economic development, cultural development of the country. This is the way that Mahatma Gandhi first time talked about what is the meaning of education, that is all-round development. That is drawing out the best of a child. Every child has a potentiality, innate potentiality, and basic objective of education is to draw out the best. Same thing was also said by Swami Vivekananda when he said, meaning of education is a manifestation of perfection already in man. I find a lot of similarity between the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi and of Swami Vivekananda. Both had a similar view about education. Sir, I want to know from you today, what do you think about Mahatma Gandhi's thinking about education? And do you think that India, what he is doing today, are they really following those kind of instruction philosophy on education today? That's a question to you. Number two, when we are talking about RTE 2020, which has been adopted by the government of India now, I find there are lots of elements which have been taken from the philosophy or education philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. When you're talking about the medium of instruction should be the mother tongue, I find in our education policy, we are talking about the same thing. When you are talking about physical education, he also very much emphasized that every child should be not only mentally fit, he should be also bodily fit. So mental and also physical development, both are equally important. That we also find in our education policy, NEP 2020. What you are talking about, the education at the grassroots level. Mahatma Gandhi emphasized the most important is the skill education. That every child must have some kind of education, skill education, which will make the child self-reliant, self-sufficient, and self-confident. And also, he will be having a sense of dignity. That is also very important. And same thing we find now in the NEP 2020. These are some of the things that I find that we have a lot of things which have borrowed from philosophy, from the Mahatma Gandhi's education process or education thinking. So I would like to know, what do you think about Mahatma Gandhi's educational policy and how far today you think those education philosophies are still relevant and why India is not taking those steps very seriously? Why is it so today, after 75 years, India is still having a problem of not only eradication of illiteracy, our quality education is still not up to the mark. Some of the things that I'd like to know from you, sir, kindly throw your light. Thank you very much.
I think I'm sorry to say this while I'm talking to educators, but I think by far in India, education has become very irrelevant to the reality of our nation. Bapu had talked about education being uh, centric to the three H's, the head, heart, and hands, to enlighten the mind, to attract the heart, and to appeal to the heart, and to empower the hands with skills. But we forgot to do that. And although it seems as if now there is an effort to make amends for that. But education to be effective and useful has to be decentralized. Education policy cannot be made in the center and enforced in the villages and districts of India, because India, we must understand, is a very diverse country with very diverse requirements in its far-flung places. And so basically education should be decentralized, and every region, if not every region, every states of the every state should have should be formulating education for its own state and the requirements of the various districts and villages and regions in that area. Unless that happens, I don't think education is ever going to be. Today, we see that, in Bapu's time, a matriculate was job worthy, would find a job. Today, a matriculate has no possibilities of ever finding a productive job for himself. Today, even graduates find it difficult to get a job, and even professional education does not guarantee you have a job. You look at engineers. Most of the engineers today, after even studying from the most prestigious colleges and getting their engineering degrees, are looking for their second degrees to become eligible for a good job. Most of the engineers are, after becoming engineers, becoming managers and doing management courses so that they become more attractive in the job market. And that shows the deterioration in the quality of education. We talk about RTE, but before we talk about RTE, we should have had a program to make the quality of education universal and standardized throughout the country. But you look at the disparity between education in the villages and education in the urban areas. Look at the disparity between education opportunities in private schools and in public schools, government aided schools and non-aided schools. And you will realize that even in our schooling and primary education, we are not creating a unified intellect or things. There is disparities, vast disparities in that. And this shows how much our education system has so far failed the needs and requirements of our people. Bapu had realized all this in his lifetime itself, and he had talked about his whole model of Nai Talim was based on that fact that every village should have a slight unique twist to the education that they impart in that village, so that the educated from that village would find productive use for themselves and occupation for themselves in that village itself, and would not have to leave. Today, a village matriculate is desperate to get out of that village because he or she knows that they have no opportunity of occupation in that village. They have to go to the cities. We call ourselves a democracy, but our education does not reflect the democratic principle at all. At the most, it shows the autocracy of education, because neither the teachers nor the students have the freedom to decide what and how they're going to learn and what and how they're going to teach. There is no democracy in our education. It's all decided by either some babu or some mantri. Even the textbooks are decided by them. Even a child or a teacher does not have the right to decide that, okay, you tell me the subject, but I will choose the textbook from which to teach that. And so this is how do we expect our students who learn and get educated to even understand the principle of democracy? Because they have not been brought up in the democratic spirit at all. So I think that there is a grave need for introspection in that education policy also, and we are still quite far away from arriving at an ideal point in that. That's what I believe.
Bhattacharya sir?
I would also like to add a few more points, sir. You've touched upon a very, very cardinal, very important point, that unless and until you are not giving that freedom to the teachers, to the management for innovation, for experimentation, education can never grow. This in a democracy, this is very, very important that some kind of a freedom to be given to the teachers for thinking, for innovation, for experiments, which is now being not being allowed so much. Everything, there is a kind, complete control or regulation or monopoly of the government. Under this kind of situation, certainly the quality education we are aspiring to promote is not possible. Second thing that I like to say, that Mahatma Gandhi said that there is a difference between education and literacy. Literacy does not mean education. It can be means to attain education, but literacy itself is not education. Another thing that he said, that education is a long line process. At any point of time, at any age, you can start your education, your literacy. So there is no age bar. And that is the importance of the adult education also that he talked about when he was talking about education policy for India in those days in 1935-37. Sir, one more thing that I'd like to know from you, that we're talking about pre-India, and we adopted our constitution in India in 1950, in the direct principles of state policy, where very clearly mentioned that within a period of 10 years' time, India should be able to eradicate 100% illiteracy. Unfortunately, even after 75 years, we have not been able to attain that. Even today, almost about 25%, 30% people are not going to school. Not only that, if you compare the quality of education in India today with the international standard, unfortunately, we are lagging behind. Our quality education is nothing matching with the international standard. What is the malady? What is the reason? Is it the education policy? Is it some kind of a malady in our education system? Is it that we are not very serious about education? Is it that we are not giving that emphasis, importance to education? Is it so that education is still not in the top priority? The top countries in the world, their investment of education is the highest. Talking about Finland, talking about Japan, talking about any developed country in the world, they think education is the most important investment, social and economic development. We are talking, there is lots of talk about education in our country, but we are not very serious about it. What is happening today, only 3.5% of the GDP is allotted only on education. It's a very pathetic impact. We are still not serious. We are still not thinking that this is education. We can only take the country forward. We can take the country progressive. We can take the country at par with the developed countries. But unfortunately, nothing is happening on ground. That I'd like to know about you, what exactly you'd like to say about it.
It's a very vast subject that you asked me to talk about. But I think that the best answer to this is to ask everyone to look at our defense budget and then compare it with our education budget. And the answer is very clear to us what our priorities have become since independence. We waste all our monetary resources on defense, and we've neglected education. And the most neglected is, it's not the number of schools that we have created, As a matter of fact, we have managed to build schools, and especially government and rural schools, to an admirable level. But most of those schools are just walls, because we have not invested, at least in the government schools, we have not invested in teacher training at all. There is a lack of quality teachers, and today we see how bad it is in the villages. And that when you have a system like that, it's not even right to talk about quality education. But I'm sorry to say this, but I have another program, so I'll have to leave in 10 minutes, just for your knowledge, that
Yes, sir. Yes,
I
sir.
only have 10 minutes left now to
Yes,
be
sir.
with you.
Yes, sir. Bhattacharya sir also asked a question, sir. What is your opinion? और इसको अगर सर हम हिंदी में बात करेंगे तो I think it will be very nice. What's your opinion of the elementary education?
I think that
Which is proposed.
this is the issue that most probably we should not ask him, because this is totally a government policy. The government now unfortunately had very narrow outlook. They do not have any idea what we call holistic education. They are not realizing that today education sector, the contribution of the private sector is enormous. Not only that, in terms of investment, in terms of number of schools in the country, almost 50% complete are the private schools today. And if you take it very pragmatic way, whatever the things that are happening in the field of education, they're talking about the promotion of quality education, bringing changes in the education sector, innovations, experiments, everything and all, with the limited autonomy that the private schools are having, very limited autonomy that schools are having, they are trying to utilize them at an optimum level. But unfortunately, the government has not yet realized that what exactly or should be the role of private sector. They are not considering so far the private sector as a partner with the government for the promotion of quality education. They are not understanding education is an investment. And when you're talking about investment and talking about today's world of education, where we need a technology, we need empowerment of teachers, we need better quality of people in education, that needs a lot of investment. Government is unnecessarily interfering in those matters and very unfortunate. I don't know whether Mr. Gandhi will be able to give any comment on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, may I also request you to add here, if you feel that the elementary education, which is proposed in the National Education Policy 2020, should be in the regional language or the national language. So, what is your?
This
You
is
want me to answer, or?
I will say a few words,
Okay.
and I will be requesting Gandhi ji to give his response to that. Even Mahatma Gandhi ji had said that the medium of instruction should be only the mother tongue or the regional language. Why he said it? Not because it is easy to understand. Not only that, you are more comfortable with your mother tongue. Not only that, you comprehend better with the mother tongue. It is also the question of self-dignity and also the respect for the nation, for the country. Once you are following, having the medium instruction, that is Hindi or the regional language, not only that you identify your national identity, you also feel proud of you, proud that you belong to a country and your medium instruction is what exactly the language that you talk in your family or around your society and so on and so forth. I believe that this is very important, but at the same time, not very it is not very possible to adopt this immediately. It has to be a process. Once you are having English as a medium instruction in the school, the private school, and suddenly tomorrow you say, no, switch over to Hindi medium or switch over to any other medium that is mother tongue or regional language, not be very easy. But slowly and gradually, over the next 10 years' time, I believe that's very important that we have to switch over from the English medium to the mother tongue, and that is to be going to be the national policy. We cannot take it off pocket. That's my personal approach.
So,
Alka ji, देखिए, मैं इसका जवाब दूंगा कि मैं खुद गुजराती मीडियम में पढ़ा
बिल्कुल सही।
बच्चा हूँ, और मैंने 10वीं तक मेरा शिक्षण का माध्यम गुजराती था। लेकिन आज मैं भारत की 4 भाषाएं बहुत ही शुद्ध तरीके से बोल और लिख सकता हूँ, पढ़ सकता हूँ। और अंग्रेजी मैंने अपनी स्कूल में अपने टीचरों से और अपने माँ बाप से और अपने आप से सीख कर आज मुझे कोई ऐसी दिक्कत होती नहीं है कि मैं अंग्रेजी में ना बोल सकूं और लिख सकूं। लेकिन हमारे जैसे मुल्क में ये कह देना कि हर बच्चा अपनी मातृभाषा में पढ़ेगा, वो थोड़ा एक खतरनाक भी इसलिए हो सकता है कि आप अब सोचिए कि जिन बच्चों के माँ बाप ट्रांसफरेबल जॉब्स करते हैं,
Exactly.
और जिनको अगर उनकी नौकरियां अलग अलग स्टेट्स में ले जाएं, तो उस बच्चे की सिखाई का क्या होगा। इसलिए पैरेलली उसमें एक अंग्रेजी मीडियम की शिक्षण प्रणाली होना बहुत जरूरी है, जो यूनिफाइंग एजुकेशन पॉलिसी होगी। और क्योंकि अगर मैं मेरी शुरुआत के 2 साल महाराष्ट्र में पढ़ूं और बाकी के 2 साल गुजरात में या पंजाब में या बंगाल में जाके पढ़ने लगूं, तो मेरा एजुकेशन तो कम्प्लीटली मुझे कंफ्यूज कर देगा। और इसलिए ये भी जरूरी है कि साथ साथ हम एक ऐसा मीडियम रखें जो नेशनली सबको एक्सेप्टेबल। और दूसरा ये है कि अगर हम राष्ट्रभाषा के ऊपर भार देकर ये कहते हैं कि राष्ट्रभाषा में यूनिफाइंग एजुकेशन करेंगे, तो दक्षिण के सारे राज्यों को हम नजरअंदाज कर देंगे, क्योंकि उनके लिए उनकी भाषाओं का महत्व आज भी बहुत है, और वो नहीं चाहते कि वो उनकी भाषाओं को के ऊपर हिंदी को अपने ऊपर थोपने दे। इसलिए हमारे देश की जो जरूरत है उनको देखकर हमने ऐसी एक एजुकेशन सिस्टम बनानी चाहिए, और इसीलिए एजुकेशन सिस्टम सेंट्रलाइज नहीं बननी चाहिए, वो स्टेट स्पेसिफिक और रीजन स्पेसिफिक ही होनी चाहिए। और हर स्टेट और हर रीजन की अपनी खुद की एजुकेशन पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए। मैं तो ये मानता हूँ कि हर स्कूल और हर इंस्टीट्यूशन की अपनी खुद की एजुकेशन पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए, और वो डिसाइड करे कि उनके बच्चों को क्या जरूरी है। पर मैं ये नहीं समझता कि अंग्रेजी मीडियम में से सीखने से हम ज्यादा होशियार बच्चे बना सकते हैं। मैं खुद अपने आप को होशियार समझता हूँ, और मुझे बहुत नाज है कि मैं भारत की 4 भाषाएं बोल सकता हूँ और 2 भाषाएं समझ भी सकता हूँ, और अंग्रेजी तो बोलता ही।
What a beautiful thought,
ये
sir.
जो आप कह रहे हैं, आप जो कह रहे हैं, बिल्कुल आपसे सहमत हूँ कि मेरे भी सौभाग्य है कि हिंदी बोलने में भी किसी प्रकार की मुझे दिक्कत नहीं होती है, क्योंकि मैं लखनऊ में पैदाशी हूँ और लखनऊ में मेरी पढ़ाई हुई है। मेरी अपब्रिंगिंग भी लखनऊ में है, तो हिंदी, उर्दू और अंग्रेजी और बांग्ला, इसके अतिरिक्त और भी 2 भाषा मैं भी बोल सकता हूँ। मैं ये भी आपसे शेयर करना चाहता हूँ, जब मैं पहली बार स्कूल में गया, हमारे समय तो उस समय पंखे भी नहीं होते थे क्लास में, और वहाँ पर हमारे बच्चों को पढ़ाई जाती थी हमारी हिंदी माध्यम से। हिंदी माध्यम से पढ़ने के बावजूद भी मैं एक पब्लिक स्कूल का प्रिंसिपल बना और 30 साल तक राज्य की। तो ये बात बहुत सही नहीं है कि अगर माध्यम हमारी हिंदी हो, आगे जाकर हम दूसरी भाषा को नहीं सीख सकते। सवाल उठता है कि हमारे देश की भाषा की नीति क्या है। भाषा की नीति जब तक हम नए तैयार करें और उस पर हमारी सीरियसली उस विषय पर ना सोचे, तो ये जो आज हमारे गड़बड़ हालत चल रही है, एक हॉटस्पॉट हमारी लैंग्वेज पॉलिसी हिंदुस्तान में चल रही है, वो चलता रहेगा। और हमें कभी भी आगे जाकर हमारे नेशनल पॉलिसी, एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, विशेष रूप से लैंग्वेज पॉलिसी पर कोई भी एक निर्णय हम नहीं ले पाएंगे। इसलिए इस विषय पर और गंभीरता के साथ आलोचना करने की आवश्यकता है, जिससे आगे जाकर हम तय कर सके कि भारत की शिक्षा व्यवस्था में कौन सी मीडियम ऑफ इंस्ट्रक्शन होनी चाहिए। अंग्रेजी को हम बिल्कुल नहीं कह रहे अंग्रेजी हटा दीजिए, लेकिन साथ साथ ये भी समय आ गया है बहुत सीरियसली कि कब तक 75 साल के बाद भी आज तक हमने अपनी नेशनल, हमारी मीडियम इंस्ट्रक्शन के बारे में, हमारे लैंग्वेज पॉलिसी के बारे में हम अभी तक कोई तय नहीं कर पाए। ये दुर्भाग्य की विषय है।
Sir, मैं आपको 1 minute और लूंगी because it will be incomplete if I do not propose a vote of thanks at this
No,
point.
please go ahead.
So it's been a beautiful start of a day, and how could it get better than when it starts in conversation with two iconic personalities, and the discussion revolves around a legend. So to be able to educate and address young children who are the future of the nation is always a pleasure, but sharing the space with great personalities like Mr. Tushar Gandhi and Mr. S.K. Bhattacharya is an honor. It's a nice moment, when a pleasure and honor is moving simultaneously. So I cannot express how happy I feel today, this morning. So this day, 2nd October, is extremely special for Modern Public School because the founder lady of the school, she delivered her boy on the 2nd of October, and she left this planet on 30th January. So there has to be some connect with Mahatma Gandhi. Uh, and the boy who was born on 2nd October happens to be my husband, and I feel a lot of similarity uh, in the habits that he shares with Mahatma Gandhi. And the philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi, therefore, are very, very close to our organization, to me at a personal level also. And we try our level best, sir, that they flow through the entire system and affect all the stakeholders um, associated to our school. We at Modern Public School uh, believe that to be wholly fruitful, the study of Gandhiji should be more than historical. The moment the great and the mighty figure and the sayings of Mahatma Gandhi, particularly when he says that to be the change you want to see in this world, they come rise before us. I think a question pops up in my mind. What is the relevance of Gandhiji today and in future? And with that thought, I reached out to Mr. Tushar Gandhi because I really wanted to see and hear it for myself and for my students. And I think we get a very, very fair idea that anger is not bad, but how we use the anger is what makes the difference, how we need to protect the environment. And at personal and professional level, I think the philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi have really, really impacted me. And I think for centuries to come, the relevance of Mahatma Gandhi will, beyond any doubt, be felt more and more with every passing day. So, I remember the words of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, which he said immediately after Gandhiji's exit from the world. They are still, found prophetic when he said, light is gone and yet it will shine for thousands of years. And sir, I remember having read that Dr. Martin Luther King, the Nobel Prize winner of the USA, when he came to India for a pilgrimage in 1959, after a month of sojourn in the land of Mahatma Gandhi, he was asked a cynical question at a press conference in Delhi: where is Gandhi today? So he was asked, do you see Gandhi anywhere? And Dr. King's reply was, Gandhi is inevitable. If humanity is to progress, Gandhi is inescapable. And see, sir, how beautifully, his legacy is being carried out by your family, and how the anecdotes of his personal life are being shared with the children, which will really, really impact them today, I feel. So Gandhiji, I believe, was a great soul, and he spelt love as non-violence in thought, words, and deeds, as you said. And this was the shortest cut to human progress and evolution, both individual and social. And sir, one take back from this session is that yes, you tried to demystify Mahatma, and all of us feel that because he was Mahatma, he was able to do all the good deeds and he could do justice to his actions because he was a superpower. But no, you said he was another ordinary man like any one of us. And if he could be the change maker, if he could do certain things, why can't each one of us do? You know, So I feel he's inspired us for non-violent life also, as you said, no anger. And of course, we read the slogans everywhere on churches, hospitals, yoga centers, political rallies, flyers, what, where all and where not. That be the change you wish to see in the world. So whenever I see people just sitting in a conference or a symposium or maybe on a news channel and just criticizing the way things are happening around, my question is, what has your contribution to bring about the change that you want to see? So, sir, how I want my students and the rest of the world to know and resolve that be the change you want to see means that we have to choose and commit our actions to do the right things, even if no one is watching us. I also feel, Sir, Gandhi ji's name is also a synonym for sustainability. Unlike every year, this year too, we had some very innovative project competitions and symposiums to connect the youth to the thoughts of Gandhiji. And our flagship endeavor this year during COVID is that we wanted to reach out to the underprivileged in the slums, and we converted the fleet of buses that we had into a school. So, one bus was converted as a library, one bus is converted as a science park, one is converted as a roti bank. So I think Gandhiji's vision of sustainability and now resonates with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and we are holding hands on that account. And a remarkable job in the Sustainable Development Goals. Um, is being done by our school to eradicate hunger, inequality, and to promote education and protect our environment. So I seek the blessings of Mr. Tushar Gandhi and Bhattacharya sir to be never afraid, that I should never be afraid of putting the right foot forward to bring the change that Gandhiji so desperately wanted to see in this world. And sir, you'll be very gratified to know that the legacy that started with Mahatma Gandhi will certainly continue with the schools, because we are molding the future of the world, and certainly we are not going to put Mahatma Gandhi to any shame, because there is no one else on earth till today like Mahatma Gandhi. And sir, I wish to record a hearty vote of thanks for you, Mr. Tushar Gandhi, and you, Mr. Bhattacharya, for sparing your very valuable time on a holiday, particularly. To be with us and to enlighten us. And certainly, sir, the new education policy does talk about the head, heart, and hand. The head, when we talk about critical thinking, and it's talking greatly about critical thinking, innovations, and the heart, when we talk about spirituality and empathy. I think that is also covered in the national education policy. And the hand means experiential and project based learning. So I have great hopes with the education policy, and it should do justice to Mahatma Gandhi's thoughts. And the Nai Talim book has been actually referred to by our Honorable Secretary of Education, Ms. Anita Karwal, and she ensured that in the 150th year of Mahatma Gandhi, we couple of educationists should go to the Nai Talim school, that is Anand Niketan in Wardha, and we spent a complete day there understanding the philosophies that Mahatma Gandhi and the changes Mahatma Gandhi wanted to see in education. And sir, with your blessings, I think the schools will be able to do justice henceforth. With these words, I once again, with folded hands, thank you both for sparing your valuable time and enlightening
I
us.
want to especially say thank you to Alka
Thank
ji
you. Thank
and
you.
Namaskar तुषार गांधी जी. आपके
Thank you.
बात करने में बहुत अच्छा लगा, तो आपको सीखने का मौका भी
आपसे
मिला.
प्रॉमिस से थोड़ा सा ज्यादा वर्क ले लिया, बट ऑनेस्टली इट वाज अ लर्निंग एक्सपीरियंस फॉर ऑल ऑफ अस. थैंक यू वेरी मच सर, and stay connected and stay safe and stay healthy, sir. Thank you.